The darkness didn't just fall, it felt heavy, like wet wool pressing against Elias's lungs. He fumbled for his industrial flashlight, the beam cutting a weak, dusty path through the air. He checked his watch again. 3:15 a.m. He had been running for what felt like miles, but the clock refused to budge. He realized with a jolt of terror that he wasn't just trapped in space, but in a pocket of stagnant time. The pharmacy Elias stumbled into the pharmacy section, hoping to find a heavy door he could lock. Instead, he found the shelves filled with jars of rest. Inside the jars weren't pills, but small, moving, human teeth. The dragging sound was now directly behind him. He spun around, his light catching a glimpse of a rollback sign. Underneath it stood a figure. It looked like a cashier, but her skin was the color of a receipt, and her mouth had been stapled shut into a permanent, gruesome grin. She lifted a scanner gun. The red laser dot landed on Elias's chest. Beep. The sound was deafening in the silence. On the digital display of a nearby register, a price appeared. 0 cents. The 3:45 shift Elias scrambled over a pharmacy counter, his heart hammering against his ribs. He crouched low, hiding behind a wall of vitamins. He waited. He breathed. He counted his heartbeats. He stared at his watch until his eyes burned. Finally, the digital numbers flickered. 3:45 a.m. Suddenly, the store's intercom crackled to life. A distorted, cheerful version of a 1980s pop song began to play. But the lyrics were wrong. "You can never leave. We have everything you need." The overhead lights slammed back on, but they weren't white anymore. They were sickening, bruised, purple. The manager's office Elias saw his chance. The manager's office was visible across the Action Alley. If he could get to the landline, maybe he could call the outside world. He sprinted. As he ran, the floor beneath him began to soften, turning from linoleum into something resembling tacky, sun-warmed skin. His boots made a wet, shuck-shuck sound with every step. He burst into the office and slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt. He grabbed the phone. No dial tone, just the sound of someone or something breathing heavily on the other end. "Please," Elias sobbed into the receiver. "Let me out." The voice on the other end wasn't the grinding glass voice from before. It was his own voice. "I'm sorry, Elias. We're out of stock on exits." The final display, Elias turned around to look out the office's observation window. The store was no longer empty. The customers had arrived. Thousands of them, pale and hollow-eyed, were wandering the aisles. They weren't shopping. They were wandering in perfect, synchronized circles, and in the center of the store, Marcus was there. He was being hoisted up by the creature with the many joints, his body being tucked into a giant cardboard display case labeled New Arrival. Elias looked down at his own hands. They were turning a pale, waxy white. His blue vest was beginning to fuse to his skin. The waxy transformation was creeping up Elias's forearms, turning his skin into the same hard, lifeless plastic as the mannequins in apparel. He knew if he stayed in the office, he'd be nothing more than a store fixture by 4 a.m. The emergency hatch Elias remembered a legend among the veteran night shifters. The compactor room. It was the only place in the building where the floor wasn't built on the foundation. It was a direct hole to the waste systems below. He grabbed a heavy metal fire extinguisher from the office wall and kicked the door open. The purple light hit him like a physical weight. The shoppers stopped their circling. Thousands of heads snapped toward him, their necks cracking in unison. "Price check," they whispered, a chorus of dry, paper-thin voices. "Price check on life." The gauntlet Elias didn't wait. He bolted toward the back of the store, through the meat and produce section. The smell was unbearable, the rot of 1,000 forgotten summers. The creature from the rafters dropped from the ceiling, its spindly limbs blocking the path to the warehouse doors. It hissed, its face unfolding like a blooming flower made of raw meat. Elias didn't slow down. He swung the fire extinguisher with every ounce of terror-fueled strength he had. Kah! The metal cylinder smashed into the creature's head, spraying a thick, gray fluid across the floor. The monster shrieked, a sound like a dial-up modem screaming in pain, and recoiled. Elias lunged through the swinging rubber doors into the back warehouse. The compactor. The warehouse was a labyrinth of towering steel racks piled high with brown boxes. The boxes weren't labeled with brands. They were labeled with names. Higgins, 1994. Rodriguez, 2012. Elias, 2026. The box with his name on it was vibrating. He reached the heavy steel maw of the trash compactor. It was the only thing in the store that felt real. Greasy, rusted, and smelling of actual garbage. He began frantically punching the emergency reverse codes into the keypad. Behind him, the warehouse doors groaned. The shoppers were pushing through, their plastic hands scratching against the rubber. Marcus, or what was left of him, was at the front of the pack, his eyes replaced by 2 flickering blue LEDs. Elias, Marcus's voice droned. Your break is over. You're needed in ISO 1. The leap, the compactor's hydraulic teeth began to retract, revealing a dark, vertical shaft that led deep into the earth. Elias didn't know if it led to the sewers or to a bottomless pit, but it wasn't the store. He looked at his watch. One last time. 3:59 a.m. The plastic reached his neck. His jaw felt stiff, his tongue turning to polystyrene. With a final, choked cry, he threw himself into the black void of the compactor, just as the clock struck 4 a.m. The aftermath. At 6 a.m., the morning manager, Sarah, unlocked the front doors. The sun was shining over the parking lot. The store looked perfectly normal. Morning, Elias, she said, walking past a new mannequin in the seasonal section. The mannequin was wearing a blue vest. It looked remarkably realistic. It even had a look of pure, frozen terror on its face. Sarah adjusted its name tag, which read Elias, and moved on to check the registers. Beside the mannequin, a single plastic pumpkin sat on the floor. Inside it, a watch was ticking. It finally read 4:01 a.m.